Nestar, the Polaroid archive. The camera was sealed with duct tape. Inside, photographs that should never have been developed. Emma understood this only when the first guard's boot crashed through her apartment window and the second one grabbed her by the throat. That had been 6 hours ago. Now the iron gate groaned upward, and she was still alive. Barely. 13 hours earlier, the attic of the Miller estate had been nothing but heat and dust. Emma's hand, encased in blue latex, pulled the heavy wool blanket away from the stack of boxes. Dust exploded into the shaft of sunlight, streaming through the circular attic window, a cloud so thick it looked solid, animated, alive. She wore a paper mask that fogged with each breath. Her eyes watered behind it. The rasp of fabric dragging over cardboard filled the silence. Just her and the dead client's forgotten things. Just Emma and the heat and the ticking clock downstairs. She reached into the first box. Her fingers brushed something cold, heavy. Leather. She pulled out the Polaroid SX70 camera. Black, peeling, ancient. The finish was worn smooth in places where hands had gripped it 1,000 times. But there was something wrong with it. Across the film door, someone had taped a thick strip of silver duct tape. Not casually applied. Methodically. Deliberately, Emma turned it over, shook it near her ear. A soft, wet sliding sound, like something moving inside the camera's casing, not film. Something else. Something wrong. She checked the film counter. The red numbers read 10. A full pack, unexposed. She tilted the camera, listening again to that muffled thud from within. Emma! Sarah's voice echoed up through the attic hatch, distorted by the wooden ladder and the hollow space between floors. Emma, you coming? The lawyer's here. Emma slid the camera into her oversized canvas tote bag, nestling it between old paperbacks and her latex glove box. Something about it demanded keeping. Not the kind of thing you left behind. She climbed down the ladder, her sneakers hitting each rung with mechanical precision. The attic air was already fading behind her, being replaced by the cooler, normal air of the hallway. But the weight of the camera in her bag felt heavier than it should have. 10 o'clock at night. Emma's kitchen light flickered, casting her apartment in a stuttering half-dark. The rain hammered against the window. She stood at her counter with a kitchen knife in her hand. The silver duct tape curled back like skin as she sliced it. The knife work was careful, precise. Something in her already knew this tape was important, that nothing about this camera was casual. She pressed the eject button. The camera whirred, mechanical, hungry. The first Polaroid slid out, white, blank, glossy. She set it on the Formica table and watched. The chemicals swirled, gray bleeding into muddy yellow. The image emerged slow, like something surfacing from deep water. Emma's breath stopped. It wasn't a family photo. It was a woman's face. Eyes wide, mouth covered by a black leather gag. Her hair was matted with something dark. Behind her, a wall of damp concrete with scratched lettering. Day 42. Emma cleared the camera. 9 more photos spilled out in rapid succession. She fanned them across the table like tarot cards. In one, a man in a judicial robe stood over a kneeling victim, the robe's silk catching the camera's flash. His face was half obscured by shadow, but his hand, the one resting on the victim's shoulder, was perfectly lit. On his ring finger, a large gold signet with a serpent coiled around itself. The eye of the serpent was a small ruby, glinting red. Her phone vibrated. The Polaroids danced across the table. Sarah. The screen glowed. Emma didn't pick up. She stared at the man in the robe instead, at the serpent ring, at the way his posture spoke of absolute power. She kept not picking up. The Asheville Herald building sat in darkness, except for a single light in the basement office. Rain sheeted down from an industrial sky. The parking lot was mostly empty, just Emma's sedan and a dark SUV with tinted windows parked at the far edge, headlights off. Emma sprinted through the downpour, her tote bag clutched to her chest. Her sneakers splashed into a puddle so deep it soaked through to her socks. Behind her, she could feel the SUV's attention, not on her yet, but tracking. A man in a heavy rain slicker stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. He moved fast. His hands reached for the bag. Emma swung with both hands, pivoting her whole body into it. The camera inside the canvas acted like a hammerhead. It connected with the man's face, a dull thud that traveled up her arms. He staggered, but his hands closed around her wrist and twisted. She screamed. The sound cut through the rain, raw and animal. She brought her knee up sharply, connected with groin. He doubled over, groaning into the wet pavement, his breath coming in heaves that sounded almost like prayer. Emma ripped her wrist free. Pain bloomed there, spreading like ink in water. Her sedan was 10 feet away. She dove for it, keys fumbling, fingers shaking so badly the metal scraped and scraped against the ignition slot. The engine roared to life. Just as the man's hand slapped against her driver's side window, she gunned the accelerator. The tires screamed. Rain flew in sheets. She drove without thinking, muscle memory taking her downtown to the Herald building. To Ben, to the only person who might know what those photographs meant. Ben's basement office was a disaster of coffee stains and newspaper clippings and yellow post-it notes covered in dense handwriting. Ben himself looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Wild beard, eyes ringed with sleeplessness, the kind of gaunt intensity that comes from obsession. He spread the Polaroids out under his high-intensity desk lamp. Used a magnifying glass on the serpent ring, studying it with the kind of focus reserved for religious artifacts or evidence of war crimes. Emma sat on a stack of old newspapers, holding a cold Gatorade bottle to her bruised wrist. She watched his face, watched it go pale, watched his eyes go bloodshot as the information processed through whatever corner of his mind had been waiting for exactly this evidence. He pulled a newspaper clipping from a file labeled Shepherds of Dust in black marker. The photo showed Mayor Higgins at his inauguration 5 years ago, smiling with that particular politician's smile, all teeth and calculation. On his finger, unmistakable in the afternoon sunlight, the same serpent ring. The headline read, "Mayor Higgins vows to clean up streets." Ben's voice came out as a whisper, terrified and certain. "It's not just a cult, Emma. It's the administration." 1 in the morning. The alleyway behind the Herald building was narrow, lined with dumpsters and stacked pallets. The door, heavy steel, industrial, clicked shut behind them as they exited. 2 men in tactical gear emerged from the shadows. One held a taser, the prongs clicking with blue electricity. Snap, snap, snap. The sound of something hungry. Ben threw his laptop bag at the first man's head. The laptop crashed against the man's visor, cracking the plastic in a spiderweb pattern. Ben tackled him into a stack of wooden pallets. They went down hard. The pallets splintered, wood cracking with a sound like bones breaking. The second man grabbed Emma from behind in a chokehold. Pressure, immediate and crushing. She reached back, found his eyes through his tactical goggles, her fingers gouged. She felt the soft give of eye socket, the warm fluid. He screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure animal pain, and released her. Emma picked up a lead pipe from the ground. Discarded, rusted. She swung low, felt the pipe meet the man's kneecap, a sickening wet crunch. He collapsed, his leg folding wrong, and she and Ben scrambled toward the street. They ran. Behind them, One guard was weeping into his hands. The other lay gasping among the splinters. Ben's cabin sat in the Blue Ridge Mountains, 3 hours north, a place he'd mentioned once or twice but never clearly, until tonight when he'd rattled off the address and driven like something was chasing him. The drive had been silent except for the engine and the rain and Emma's own heartbeat. The cabin was small, isolated, the kind of place where screaming wouldn't travel to neighbors. Inside, Ben pulled back a rug to reveal a floor safe. He dialed the combination, spin right, spin left, spin right, and pulled it open. Inside, burner phones, a digital recorder, the kind of equipment that suggested Ben had been planning for something like this for a very long time. Emma set her bag on the kitchen counter. That's when she noticed it. A faint, rhythmic red blink coming from inside her canvas tote. She reached in, pushed past the camera and the books and the debris of her normal life. Her fingers closed around something small, magnetic, a GPS tracker, military grade, red LED pulsing like a heartbeat. Somewhere outside, a drone whined. The cabin window exploded, glass everywhere, fragments that caught the light like diamonds before turning into something sharper and more terrible. A flashbang grenade rolled across the floor, hissing. Emma and Ben dove for the cellar door as the room erupted in blinding white light. The detonation was a wall of sound and fury. The world became only brightness and noise, and the physical sensation of being shattered from the outside in. Emma woke strapped to a galvanized steel chair. Her wrists were held by thick leather manacles that had worn grooves into the metal arms from years of struggling. Above her, a bank of strobe lights flickered at a frequency that made thinking impossible. The lights strobed at roughly the same rate as a human heartbeat in extreme panic. Designed, she understood immediately, to induce exactly that state. Rhythmic electric humming filled the air. That and something else. A whisper. A voice distorted and looped and repeated until it stopped meaning anything. Just sound. Just invasion. To her left, Ben was strapped to an identical chair. His head lolled. His eyes were half open but seeing nothing. A set of headphones was glued to his head, literally some kind of adhesive holding them in place. From them came the muffled hissing of that looped whisper. A shadow fell across the concrete floor. Mayor Higgins walked into the light, wearing the same robe from the photographs. Black silk, gold trim. He was holding the Polaroid camera, Emma's camera, in his hands like a trophy. His face was serene, his eyes were predatory. He smiled at her. The slow, rhythmic click of his shoes on concrete. Click, 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 each step deliberate. He was in no hurry. Here, in this room, there was no hurry to anything. You know what the most interesting thing about you is, Emma? His voice was smooth, practiced. The voice of someone who had given speeches to crowds and small conversations to victims in dark rooms. You were always so close to seeing the light, and you never did. He held the camera up. This device was my greatest teaching tool. The photographs it takes, they teach what words cannot. They teach about service, about hierarchy, about the proper order of things. He stepped closer, close enough that Emma could smell his cologne. Expensive. Cedar and bergamot underneath something darker. Your friend Sarah understood this from the beginning. She understood that the world is full of chaos and pain, and that only through proper structure can anyone find peace. She wanted that for you. He leaned down, his mouth near her ear. She chose that attic for you, Emma. She wanted you to see the light, and look, you did see it. You just had the wrong reaction. He straightened up, smiled, nodded to someone outside her field of vision. The strobes intensified. The mayor walked back into the shadows of the room. Emma's hand moved. She'd been palming a shard of glass from the cabin explosion lodged in her palm since the blast. She'd used 3 hours in that cell to work it free enough to hold. She sawed at the leather of her manacle. Sawed and sawed. The glass was sharp but brittle. It drew her own blood, mixing with her sweat. The leather was old, aged, cracked. It snapped. Her left arm was free. She lunged forward, her hand grabbing the mayor's throat. He fell backward, shock in his eyes for the first time. His hands came up, clawing at her wrist, trying to break her grip. She squeezed. She had no training. She had only rage. A guard rushed in from the shadows, a man with a shaved head and a tactical vest. Emma kicked the mayor into him. Both men fell. Emma grabbed a heavy medical tray from a nearby table, surgical tools glinting in the strobes, and swung it at the guard's throat, metal on flesh. The tray clanged. Tools scattered across the floor. The guard recovered faster than she'd expected. He drove her backward. She stumbled over Ben's legs. The guard pinned her down, his hand on her throat. His weight was crushing. She couldn't breathe. The strobes flashed and flashed and flashed. Her hand found a scalpel. Small, precise, designed for delicate work. She drove it into the guard's thigh, just above the knee. Drove it deep. He roared, a sound that echoed off the concrete. The hand on her throat loosened. She bucked him off, scrambled to her feet, found Ben's unconscious form, dragged him toward the corridor. The hallway was pitch black. Their only light was Emma's phone screen at 20% battery. Behind them, she could hear shouting. Multiple voices. Coordinated. Professional. Ben's weight was almost more than she could carry, but she carried him. Her shoulders scraped the damp wall. Slime. Mold. The smell of a place that had never seen sunlight. The corridor stretched on, turning, descending deeper. They reached a massive iron gate. It was locked. No key visible. No handle on this side. Just iron and darkness and the approaching sound of boots. Emma turned back. Saw 5 silhouettes with flashlights. The beams cut through the darkness, blinding and methodical. Men in tactical gear, weapons drawn, expressions obscured by the light they carried. She had nothing left. No weapons. No allies. Only the Polaroid camera, still in her tote bag, slung across her body. She pulled it out, held it like a shield. The men approached. One of them spoke into a radio. The cocking of multiple handguns. The sound was mechanical and final. "Don't move," he said. Emma's fingers found the shutter button. She pressed it. The flash was blinding. The camera's high-intensity strobe designed for the era before electronic flashes, when photography required raw, brutal light. It was magnified by the narrow corridor. It bounced off concrete. It filled everything. The guards screamed, covered their eyes. Their flashlights dropped. Pop, pop, pop. Emma pressed the shutter again and again. Flash after flash. High-voltage bursts that shouldn't have been possible from a 50-year-old camera. But this camera had been modified. Everything about it had been designed for maximum impact. In the strobing light, Emma saw it. Behind a loose brick in the wall, a lever, rusted, decades old. She threw her weight onto it. The iron gate groaned, grinding metal on metal. It began to rise, slowly at first, then faster. Emma grabbed Ben and pulled him toward the opening gap. 30 seconds. They had 30 seconds before the men recovered. She dragged him through. The gate crashed down behind them. They emerged through a hidden entrance concealed behind a false bookshelf in Mayor Higgins' office. Higgins was at his desk, frantically feeding documents into a paper shredder. They disappeared into the machine with a high-pitched whine. When he looked up and saw Emma, bloody, alive, impossible, his face went white. Emma was holding the digital recorder Ben had retrieved from the safe. The rec light was steady and glowing. "That won't work," Higgins said. His voice was controlled, but his hands trembled. "You recorded in a basement built before this building existed. It's shielded. No signal." "It's all right here," Emma said. She held up the recorder. "Audio compression, timestamp, everything you said." Higgins's composure cracked. He tried to bribe her. Millions. He said it like he was ordering coffee. Millions for the device. Millions for her silence. He admitted everything, laying it out with the kind of clinical detail that only came from someone who thought he could buy his way out of anything. Emma just smiled. The recorder was on. Had been on the entire time. In that windowless chamber, with those strobes, she'd had time to think. Time to understand that Ben's foresight would have included a backup recording device. Time to understand that dying in that room meant nothing. But this moment, this meant everything. The police came through the office door. They'd been listening on a live feed from the backup transmitter. They handcuffed Higgins. They read him his rights in a voice that sounded like it was coming from very far away. Sunrise. The police station front steps. Blue lights painting everything in cycles of red and white. Sarah came running up the steps, tears streaming down her face. Her hair was disheveled. Her makeup was smeared. She threw her arms around Emma, gasping her name over and over, crying about how worried she'd been, how scared, how grateful Emma was alive. Emma didn't move. She stood there, cold, while Sarah wept against her shoulder. She reached into her jacket, pulled out a final Polaroid, one she hadn't shown Ben, one she'd palmed from the pile when he wasn't looking. Emma held it in front of Sarah's face. Sarah's crying stopped instantly. The photograph was from 5 years ago. Younger Sarah, wearing a serpent emblem around her neck, standing at a podium in an underground room, leading a chant. Her mouth open in the act of devotion or indoctrination or whatever word applied to the moment when you gave yourself over completely to something else. Sarah's face went blank. "I can explain," she whispered. "You were waiting for me to be ready," Emma said. Not a question. "I was saving you," Sarah said. Her voice had changed. The tears were gone. What replaced them was something calm and clinical and far more terrible. "I chose that attic for you. I wanted you to see the light. You were always too good for the real world, Emma. You always needed someone to take care of you. The Shepherds, we could have given you that." The detectives were already moving. They had audio. They had her on camera at the scene of the original crime. They had years of accumulated evidence that Sarah had been providing intel to Higgins's organization. They handcuffed her. Sarah didn't resist. She looked at Emma with an expression that might have been pity. "You'll see," she said. "Eventually, you'll understand. The real world will break you, and then you'll understand." Emma watched her friend be led to a separate police car, watched her be shoved into the back seat, watched the door close. She looked at the Polaroid camera one last time. The device that had started everything. The thing that had saved her. The thing that had taken everything. She walked to a trash bin on the sidewalk. She dropped the camera inside. It fell with a clatter, landing in the bottom among coffee cups and discarded newspapers and the detritus of a normal morning. The morning sun glinted off Higgins's serpent ring as he was shoved into a separate vehicle. One last glint, one last reflection. Then he was gone. Emma stood on the sidewalk. The early light was gold. A new day. The city was waking up. She walked away from the police station, one foot in front of the other, toward nowhere in particular. Behind her, the sirens wailed and echoed off the buildings. Ahead of her, the streets of Asheville stretched out, empty and ordinary, waiting. She walked